Right, welcome back, grade nines. Today we're going to take the credit sales topic a bit further, and we're going to look at the actual transaction taking place, what documents are used in these procedures and transactions, and how do we record the actual transactions in the books of the business. All right, so after the credit checks have been done on the client, the next step will then take place. So if the retailer is then satisfied that the client is indeed credit worthy and that he or she will be able to repay the debt, then they will sign the contract, they will enter into a credit agreement with that client. So the moment the client then buys something from our business, as soon as that credit sales transaction takes place, the business will issue a credit invoice to the client as proof that this transaction has taken place. So what is happening? The client comes into our store, decides what he wants, take it to the counter, to the till. It will be rung up, but there will be no exchange of money. So the client can take the items home and obviously then only pay for it at a later stage. But we need proof that this transaction has taken place, and therefore a credit invoice will be issued. Some textbooks also call it a credit sales invoice, and that will be the same thing. Now, remember when we worked in grade 8 and grade 9 with receipts, we always said that the original receipt would go to the client and the business will always keep the duplicate one. And the same thing happens here. So we will give to the client the original credit invoice and the business will keep the duplicate invoice. So that will then be our source documents that we're going to use to record the transactions in the book of the business. Please just keep in mind that this is fairly manual. The things that we're doing now, obviously we know the real world out there today is very digital, and lots of these things are done electronically. If you go to Edgar's and maybe some of the other stores as well, I think I've seen it at Jet before, but nowadays you actually sign on those little pads that they have at the tills, and then you sign electronically there, and it is stored on the system. They can still print you your document if you want to, that you can keep as proof as a client, but everything is also stored electronically. So just keep in mind that there's different ways that businesses deal with this in today's times. Right, so here we have an example of an invoice. I hope you can see the cursor. I'll start moving it around as I'm explaining what we see here. As we said before, there's many different ways of businesses creating their own invoices. It can be done on an accounting package. There's lots of ones available in the trade. You can even design it on Excel, Word, probably PowerPoint as well, and there's many other ways to do this. And this is just a generic example of the information that should be evident on a credit invoice. It needn't look like this. Obviously, every business owner can decide how this is done. You can even have them printed for your business at a printing company. You can go out still today and buy at C&A or P&A credit invoice books that the business can use if you maybe have a very small business. But what are the things that should be visible on an invoice? If you have a logo, you can put your business logo there, as well as the name of the business. That's very important. Then also the business information, the address, physical address and contact numbers. You can even put your email address or Facebook page if you've got that. That information can be included. Then very important is the invoice number. Every invoice that is issued should have a unique number so that it can easily be looked up and referred to if there are any queries from the client side, or maybe if your books get audited. So that is very important. Then obviously, because we are not selling for cash and we're selling to somebody who's going to owe this money to us, the debtor, it is very important to capture and have the client's details displaying clearly on the invoice. Here we can see we sold these items to Tebogo Letwaba. There's his physical address, telephone number. Very important, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, is that we need to allocate an account number to each of our debtors, the people who are buying on credit or on account from us. So the account number is very important. Then you'll see there is an order number as well. Now, this is usually used more when, again, a business orders from another business. They might generate an order form or a requisition from their side and then send it through to say, listen, we want to buy this and this from you. Here is our order number. So then it can also be displayed on the invoice. Then important, the date of the transaction. When did this sales transaction take place? That is quite important. We'll see that when we capture the information of the transactions in our journals a little bit later on. Then a way of displaying what has been bought or sold to the client. This business, Snazzy Sneakers, has sold to Tebogo Letwaba Converse sneakers, a black pair. There we can see he bought one, we sold one to him. The unit price is what does one pair or what does one item cost. So we can see this is 499 Rand. And because he only bought one, the total for this line is 499 Rand. On the next line, we can see we sold Vans sneakers to him, white pair. He bought two of those pairs. One pair costs 1,199 Rand, and then if we multiply that by 2, that gives us the total for that line, 2398. So that is how this is worked out. Then it's important that your invoice has a total amount, that is 2897, and that's very important because we need to record that obviously in the books of the business. What is the total amount that this debtor owes us? How do we get that? It's the 499 plus the 2398. That gives us the 2897. That is quite important. Then you might have seen this perhaps on invoices or documents before, E and OE. What does that stand for? It says errors and omissions accepted. Now this means the business does have the right to rectify any mistakes that might have occurred on an invoice. For that case, for that matter, on any other business document, that gives you the legal right. So if something went wrong, you can go and rectify it at a later stage. Then we also see here, if there's perhaps any other important information or instructions. This business says terms are strictly 30 days. So that means the debtor has 30 days from the date of the invoice to settle this invoice or to settle his or her debt. All right, so that is basically just an example of what a credit invoice can look like. You can design your own as a business owner one day. At the bottom there, you should see that there's an activity 3 for you where you can complete your own credit invoice. I will also upload that on Google Drive and our Google Classroom folder for you. Good. So now we've got the source document, the credit invoice, which is issued every time a client buys something from our business on account or on credit. And now we need to use this source document in order to record this transaction. Now we know with a credit sales transaction, we've spoken about it, there's no money exchanging hands. The client takes the products or items but will only pay for it at a later stage. So we cannot record this sales transaction, the credit sales transaction, in the CRJ because there's no money received. So as a result of that, we have to create a new journal just for all our credit sales transactions, and this journal is called the debtors journal. Now in front of you on the PowerPoint presentation, you should be able to see what I'm seeing here as well. So I'm going to go through everything step by step so that you can see how do we record transactions in this journal. On the next slide, you will actually see an exercise with transactions and then the recording of those transactions in the journal. So if we start with the heading, you know how I'm about headings and how important it is for me that you make sure that you complete your headings correctly and in full. So just as with the CRJ and CPJ, we start the heading now with debtors journal, so the name of the journal, so debtors journal of the business's name dash the month and the year. So just with as with CRJ and CPJ, the same thing. This one is now just called a debtors journal. Right. Then we also need to, as with all our other journals, number our debtors journals. Now this one is, in the example, is DJ2. And why is it DJ2? Well, it can actually be any number except for DJ1. Why? You should know by now that if we look at our document numbers, you can see that this one starts at 514. So there's no way that this is a new business. If it was a new business, the invoice number would have been 001. Nee, so then it could have been DJ1. But obviously, this is not a new business, so it can be anything from 2 onwards, depending on what information is given to you. So the number of the DJ, so this one is DJ2. There's an example. If March is DJ2, then April will be DJ3. We number the DJ in the same way that we number our CRJ and CPJs. Okay, so let's have a look at the different columns. As with our other journals, we start with our document number column. In this journal, we're only working with invoices, as we said, because it's credit sales. So we will record the invoice number, which we will get from our source document, which is the duplicate invoice or duplicate credit invoice. This is also important to remember that the document numbers must be recorded in numerical order. So 514, as you see here, 515, 516. If you do an exercise and you record something in the DJ and those numbers are not following on each other, then you must realize that somewhere there is a mistake. Then the next column that we have is our day column, and that's the day on which a transaction took place, and that information you also get on the duplicate credit invoice. You basically just record the day there. In the next column, that's our debtor name column. So there we write down the name of the person or the business to whom we sold the products on credit. So the client's name, basically. The next column that we have is our folio column. Now, this is basically the column where we record the debtor's account number. Now, you can recall from the previous slide where we looked at the account number, I said it's very important, and therefore that's that number that you're going to record in the folio column. Now, because normally in school accounting, our space is limited, we don't record those long numbers that you would find if you have an account with Edgar's or Truers. We keep it fairly simple. We say debtor number 1, debtor number 2, debtor number 3. So each debtor will have a unique account number. Please bear in mind that, let's say Bira Debbie buys from us once more. Let's say in this open line, he bought again. He will keep that number. So if he's D1 there, when he buys from us again, he will be D1 again. That is important to remember. And keep in mind, we are now selling to the debtor in the debtor's journal. Later on, we're going to look at the debtor returning stock. If something is wrong with the item he bought, we will use the same account number. If the debtor pays his debt at a later stage, we will use that same account number to record the transaction where the debtor has bought from us. Okay, if we look at the money columns in the debtor's journal, we basically only have 2 columns. We have a sales column and we have a cost of sales column. Now, the sales column, very easy as within the CRJ. In this column, we record the sales price of the goods that we sold to the debtor. And then in the cost of sales column, we record the cost price of those items that we sold to the debtor. In many cases, if you have to do an exercise in class, you will be required to calculate the cost of sales price or the cost price, and we all know what formulas to use there. We'll have a look at it in the next example as well. As with any other journal, the columns need to be totaled at the end of the month when we're done recording all the transactions for the month, and then these totals we're going to use to post to the general ledger at a later stage, which we will obviously also discuss later on. So guys, this is then an example of what a debtors journal looks like. So by the end of this presentation, you now know how to record transactions in our cash receipts journal, our cash payments journal, and now also our debtors journal. Right. Here is a follow-up or an extension of what we've discussed on the previous slide, and this is an example of a debtors journal, transactions that need to be recorded in a debtors journal. So what do they ask from us here? It says there, complete the debtors journal of Prinsloo Traders for the month of July 2019. They use a profit markup of 20% on cost. So you will obviously need that information in order to calculate your cost price in this regard. Okay, so let's have a look. You'll see here on the left-hand side 4, 8, 12, 18. Those are obviously the dates on which the transactions took place. So on the 4th, goods were sold to Adelaide Meshigu for 4,800 Rand on credit, issued invoice 57. So what do we do? In the document number or invoice column, we will record those numbers. First of all, make sure that your heading is correct. Debtors journal of Prinsloo Traders for the month July 2019 or dash July 2019. They did not give us the number of the debtors journal to use. If they don't give you one, you can use any number. Once again, in this case, it just could not be number 1 because we're not starting with a 001, but any other DJ number would suffice. Yeah. All right. So on the 4th, the document number was 57. The day is the 4th. The name of the debtor, Adelaide Meshigu. They did not give us the account numbers for the debtors, so then you will use your own. You'll generate your own. I just usually find it easier to start with D1, D2, and keep on numbering as I get to new debtors. So the first one was that we sold to her for 4,800 Rand on credit or on account. So in the sales column, 4,800 Rand. Now you need to go and work out the cost price, the cost of sales. How do we do this? Here is an example. How to calculate cost price. Cost price equals my sales price over 1 times 100 over 100 plus the profit markup. So 4,800 times 100 divided by 120, and that will give you the 4,000. And then you go and enter it into your cost of sales column. And so we do the same for all the rest of the transactions. On the 8th, sold goods on credit for 3,600 to Pepe Filakazi. Can you see that they don't or didn't give us the invoice number, but we know that these document numbers must follow on one another in numerical order. So if we got the first one, we know 58 should be the next one if the first one was 57. So 58 on the 8th, name of the debtor, Pepe Filakazi. It's a new debtor, so we create a new account number for that debtor. In my case, I used D2. Sales amount, 3,600. They gave it to us. Cost of sales, we work out with this formula. Here it is as well, our formula to work out cost price. And then you would get 3,000 Rand. Please also, grade 9s, go and check. A teacher can also make a mistake, so you need to go check me up to make sure that I've done my calculations correctly. Next one on the 12th, merchandise. Remember we said what are other words for trading stock? Goods, stock, trading stock, and merchandise. It all means they all mean the same, that we sold trading stock, again on credit to Madoda Mzwangwa for 900 Rand. We know that the next document number must be 59. It happened on the 12th. Here's the name of the debtor. We haven't sold to this person before, so we create a new account number here. 900 in sales. Use your formula to work out cost of sales, which is 750. Then on the 18th, last one, we issued an invoice to Nonkeba Ntuta for goods delivered to him on credit, 1,200. My document number is 60. Happened on the 18th. The transaction took place on the 18th. We sold to Nonkeba Ntuta. That's our debtor. New debtor, so D4. Sales amount 1,200. Use my calculation to get to 1,000 for the cost price. Very important, we need to total our journal columns as the money columns at the end of the month, and this we will use to post to the general ledger, which we will discuss at a later stage. Right, so at the bottom of the screen, you will see activity 4, where you can go and now complete your own debtors journal to test yourself and to see if you are able to complete this new journal that we have just learned.